You've played at this point with everybody. You played with Dennis. You played with Dave.
Played with a lot of guys.
Yeah, yeah. Robbie, I mean, blah blah blah. First of all, is there one thing that all these guys have in common that you could put your finger on or put into a couple of sentences?
Probably a couple of things. One thing I would say is pulse. Really nice pulse. Really
Pulse, you mean like flow?
Flow and tempo, like that comes from listening and comes from having a really sure sense of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I have room to move around with the pulse and breathe. So the two things that make that work are just being a really good drummer and having a natural feel,
mm-hmm.
and also listening.
Mm.
I think those two
and
things.
being able to adjust the pulse.
And being able to adjust the pulse. Like a pulse, like a nice pulse. We're like, wow, this feels good.
Right.
I'm not even really thinking about this. I'm riding a wave.
Right. It just kind of moves the right way.
That kind of thing. That's what a bass. That's what a bass player likes to feel.
Mm.
Maybe the things that maybe the audience wouldn't be so much in tune with. In terms of whatever technical or phrasing or signature things that the guys are doing. I'm feeling more like the pulse. That's what makes it work for me.
Kind of seems too like if that's there, then it's always like that's like the frame of reference that makes everything.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah. Right.
That to me is the bottom line.
Good. Okay. This is just kind of my own thing, but and I don't know that much about your background in this department. Where did you pick up all the stuff about Latin music? Like, how did you get into the whole Latin concept? Because
I always had an aptitude for it. I think that the big thing that got me into it and got me into developing it, to the level that I did was coming to New York and having that be really part of the vocabulary. It's the things that you had to know when you were in New York. I mean, I can just to give one story. I went to play a gig, regular like a kind of a club date gig when I first got there. Early on when I got there, and percussionist was Potato. I'm saying to myself, wow, this is a club date, and here's Potato playing. So that's the kind of thing that I was exposed to right away.
Right.
The guys who are playing percussion are the real cats.
Right.
So and then I studied. I studied with Andy Gonzalez. I studied with Joe Santiago, and I just absorbed the culture and the music.
And was it in the beginning of your career you started playing it, or did you get into it later? Or what was the first thing you started off playing as a bass player, working?
As a bass player?
Yeah.
I got a gig in Gary Taylor's Strip Lounge in Vancouver, British Columbia, playing standards. And at the time I also had aspirations to become a classical musician, and I was studying. I went to a summer camp with Gary Carr, he's retired now, but he was a famous soloist. Was conducting a seminar, and I studied bow work and classical music, and it was at that point where maybe just before I turned 20, where I wasn't sure which way I was going to go, and then I sort of went into the jazz world, or the improvisational bass groove world. Plus, just the stuff from growing up in Oakland.
Yeah, right.
And having the funk thing just be kind of like there, even though I wasn't even aware of it. It was like
you just absorbed
part of what I was.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
So you're teaching but we were talking about this earlier. You're teaching at Berkeley now, a lot. Is there something that this is kind of along the lines of the first question? Is there one thing that you see that students are lacking? Especially we're gearing this toward drums, but I guess if you want to talk about any music student.
Probably apply to bass players too. I think that the thing, I think that generally the level of students is pretty high, especially at a college like Berkeley. I think that the pitfall a lot of students get into is they don't have interest in evening out their foundational skills. Like some guys will come to me and they have really good ears, or they've got patterns and stuff that they've appropriated from the guys that they listen to, like Matt Garrison or Adrian Ferrota, or whoever it is that they're not good readers. Or there are players who are very good readers who don't know how to improvise, and so what was does that answer the question?
Yeah, pretty much. I was actually, it's kind of a negative connotation. I was asking if there was something you see that they generally lack. I asked this of other people. I was talking to Antonio Hart about this on the last gig, and he was saying that a lot of the students that he sees, they just don't. Their work ethic is not what he thinks it should be. Sometimes, you know.
That's generally true.
Yeah.
You know?
Come in. We're about to go on stage here, so hi. Yeah. So I was just curious about that because, like, if I asked
I think
Anthony,
that ties into what I was saying.
Yeah, it
Because, you know,
does.
They don't want to work on the things that foundational skills that they're weak in. You know, not. I would say, I don't know. I mean, there is a percentage of the students that are great players, but it's a minority.
right,
You know?
right.
Because of the work ethic. That's true. Yeah.
Okay, now here's the big question, and I'm trying to answer this. One of the big questions that I'm trying to answer for myself, but how
I like you, man. Of course, you're great, man. You're one of the cats, man. See that? See that? Put that on the website. There you go.
No, I mean, I was curious. I've asked this of a lot of people. A lot of people can't answer it. How do you get gigs?
How do you get gigs?
How do you get gigs as a musician? I mean, can you? Because I get asked this all the time, and I've asked it when I was coming up. I asked
Well, I
lots
can
of
say
people.
some things that worked for me.
Okay.
I think that I took advantage of every opportunity, even if I was really nervous about it.
Mm-hmm.
I took advantage of every opportunity. I showed up and I did it. You know, just for example, just from a perspective of being a bass player, there's electric bass and there's upright bass. And there were certain points in my career where I was more proficient on one instrument than the other. A situation would come up and they'd say, "Do you play upright bass?" And you know, I hadn't been, you know, working on it, you know, as much as I had maybe in the past. But the answer was always yes. And I always would go and take advantage of the opportunity.
It's basically adapting a little bit, is what you're referring.
Yeah, and also I think it's very important to keep your mind open, your spirit and your mind open to all types of music, because at some point you're going to have a use for it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't pigeonhole yourself into one type of music.
That's good
You
for
know,
you.
that's why you got to learn how to read. That's why you got to learn how to play different styles and play them well and you know, and one thing that I think that I've worked on that I've accomplished is versatility.
Yeah,
That's just from keeping an open mind.
Yeah, you have.
Keep
I mean,
an
I don't
open
think
mind and
I haven't played with too many guys like on bass that really authentically cover, especially the Latin stuff. I mean, like you authentically cover that stuff in ways that I mean, you just feel it.
Yeah,
you know?
that's just feeling, and it's all. I think I'm also a child of the age that I grew up in. You know, the 60s and the 70s. There was so much music and of all different types. You know, there was the Hendrix thing, the rock thing, there was a classical thing, there was a jazz thing, and I just absorbed it all. I didn't put any barriers between those genres.
Well, now speaking of that, how do you think the business itself has changed? Like since, say, like when I was first coming up, like early '90s versus now.
Well, I think the electronic age, the age of iTunes, and the way things are the way people buy music has changed things a lot, and I think that career choices that younger musicians are making sort of reflect that.
What about things like your day-to-day work?
Well,
scenario?
you know, now I do a lot more teaching than I used to, and I enjoy it. I don't think that the tours. I don't think there's as many tours, or the tours are as long as they used to be.
Right. What about recording?
There's less recording. The way things have been happening for me is that, you know, good things come along, but they don't come along as often. It's not like, I don't really want to say I was one of those guys like Anthony Jackson or Steve Gadd, or you know, who were like doing, you know, 7 or 8 sessions a week. But there were some times in the early '80s. Through into the '90s, where there was some session work. There were more session work. There were more studios.
Anthony told me that yeah, they would do sometimes they were doing like 3-4 a day sometimes.
He was, you know, there was Anthony and Will and then all the horn players like Ronnie Cuber and the Parker Brothers. Those cats were just tunneling from studio to studio.
Yeah,
racking it up.
Boy. Well, I just got one more question for you. This is kind of I mean, you could probably answer it with the first answer or the answer to the first question. I was just going to ask, like, how, if you had to recommend a drummer for a gig, any gig, what would be the factor? I mean, what would be the one factor that would separate that? Because especially in New York, there's like hundreds of people that you can play with. I mean, does that come down to like?
It's a good question.
I mean, it's kind of the same thing as the first one I asked, but I'm curious because, like, you know, some guys, you know, you could bring it back to the Pulse thing. You know, obviously taste.
All of those musicianship factors definitely come into play. The other thing that comes into factor is personality. You know, it depends on the situation. You know, if somebody's going to ask me for, you know, to play a thing where we're in a museum and we're playing something that requires a certain type of touch or personality, I'll think of a certain guy. You know, I'm not going to hire a rock cat to. I'm not going to recommend a rock cat to do something like that.
Right.
It depends on the situation.
Right.
I know so many great guys. You know.
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes at this point, it's like, who I, you know, the
right.
cats that I've been playing with. It's
right.
like, you know, like for instance, for you example. Yeah, him.
You know better than to recommend me for something.
Yeah, you know.
I mean, that's, you know, it's interesting.
I would consider you to be one of those guys. I would put us in the same category as guys who know how to wear a lot of different hats and wear them pretty well.
Well, I'm trying, you know, it's like, and I'm trying to sort of communicate that to students because, like,
very important.
You know, a lot of the stuff, the questions I get and things like that are mostly about, you know, how do I learn this lick, or how do I fit my shit into this gig, or how do I, you know, and you can't do any of that until you really start, you cover the bases.
Longevity, you know, if you want to make a living being a musician and you want to continue to do that, I'm not saying it's always been easy, but you know, you gotta be versatile. Hey,
Michelle.
We're almost done.
It's Michelle.
We're almost gone too.
Okay.
You know, like, you have like 3 minutes.
Okay, fair. Yeah.
We're just finishing up. You're next.
Yeah, man, you gotta come in here and do one of these.
We'll do it tomorrow.
We'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, this is, you know, I'm just curious to know everybody's opinion because, like I've asked Anthony some of these questions before. I asked Krantz some of these questions too.
Oh, yeah,
like everyone's got,
their answers.
and you know, Anthony's really got a specific idea of how
Absolutely.
things, you know, should be, and he's right.
Well,
you know?
first of all, Anthony's fantastic. He plays like every note like it means something.
Yeah.
You know, and he's an inspirational player.
That's kind of his whole crux of everything. Is like when I asked him about, you know, is there a favorite thing? He basically boiled it down to confidence and like peace of mind. Like when he sits down,
You
he
be
really,
relaxed. You know, you be
but
relaxed,
you have
be
a
confident.
forthright thing.
Yeah.
You know, especially
that-
from the drum stand.
That goes into personality. I think that translates into personality, especially for a rhythm section player. You know what I'm talking about. Where a guy, you can feel his anxiety, and it
Right.
translates into the music. It's nice to play with a guy who's got a lot of confidence,
And loose and
loose,
yeah,
and you know, and can play. On
but
top
not
of that.
so loose that it's like
Not so
lethargic.
loose that
or-
it's like that. It's
Yeah.
not communicating.
right.
So there's communication. There's technical skill. There's also personality. And I think personality is the person, and also like, you know, I hear something and I go, yeah, oh yeah, that's Cliff playing. I can tell, you know,
Right.
because you got a certain way of touching the drums. You
Right.
have a certain, you know, you have certain influences, and you've made it your own. And I can pretty much tell it's you.
Right.
I can do that with quite a few guys. I
Yeah.
can tell that it's them playing because they're.
That's kind of, and that's the
a
thing
nice
too.
thing to be able to do.
Yeah, well, and you know, one of the lesson things that I'm doing is like how to sort of bring your own voice out and try to work on stuff
Absolutely.
like that. You know, because that's important these days too, man. Because there's so many amazing players. Oh, we got to work.
We ready?
It's okay, it's on the left. I mean, something has like that kind of flavor.
So it's the third one. That's the one.
Like B, 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 E, 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 A.
Jesus, what the fuck is that?
It's like three beats.
Okay, I'll give you the pulse.
3, 4.
It's like just yes, bop, bop, bop.
Oh, okay.
The
So
last
it's like a
one
triple
is-
thing.
Yeah, it's like a triple.
Yeah.
It's like a triple.
That makes sense. That explanation makes sense.
right here, it's right here.